you ever wondered what happens to your old devices when you discard them? Where do they go? What impact do they have on our planet? As we cast off our old electronics, we are unknowingly contributing to a growing global crisis. This crisis is known as electronic waste, or e-waste, which is any discarded device with a plug or battery. From cell phones to electric cars, toys, TVs, e-cigarettes, laptops, and even solar panels. In 2022, the United Nations reported a staggering 62 million tons of e-waste was generated globally. To put this into perspective, this is enough to fill tractor trailers that could be lined up bumper to bumper around the globe. Unfortunately, this is not a one-time occurrence. E-waste is on track to reach a whopping 82 million tons by the year 2030. This rapid increase in e-waste is due to a variety of factors: higher consumption rates of electronic devices, limited repair options leading to shorter product life cycles, the growing electronification of society, and perhaps most worryingly, inadequate e-waste management infrastructure. So what makes up this e-waste? Half of it is metals, including copper, gold, and iron, which are worth around $91 billion. Plastics account for 17 million tons, and the remaining 14 million tons are made up of substances like composite materials and glass. But here's the kicker. Only just over 22% of this e-waste was properly collected and recycled in 2022, and this figure is expected to decline to 20% by the end of the decade. A staggering 62 million tons of e-waste, enough to line tractor trailers around the globe, was produced in 2022. And it's set to increase. But what can we do about it? Stay tuned to find out. What if I told you that the discarded devices you think of as trash are actually a hidden treasure? Yes, you heard that right. Your old phone, laptop, or TV isn't just a pile of junk. It's a potential gold mine, quite literally. When we talk about e-waste, we're not just talking about heaps of broken plastic and tangled wires. We're also talking about tons of valuable metals like copper, gold, and iron. Imagine this. About half of the 62 million tons of e-waste generated in 2022 was made up of these precious metals. That's the equivalent weight of over 31 million cars, each filled to the brim with copper, gold, and iron. Now, if you think that's a lot, wait until you hear this. The total worth of these metals was estimated at a whopping $91 billion. That's more than the GDP of many countries. But here's where it gets interesting. These valuable resources are not just sitting in our landfills, they are literally being thrown away. With only just over 22% of e-waste being properly collected and recycled in 2022, we are missing out on a massive opportunity. Not only does recycling e-waste help us recover these valuable resources, but it also reduces the need for mining new metals. This in turn can reduce the environmental impact and energy consumption associated with mining. It's a win-win situation, and yet, we're not taking full advantage of it. So next time you're about to throw away an old device, remember this. You're not just tossing out a piece of junk. You're discarding a tiny piece of a $91 billion treasure trove. A treasure that could be put to good use if only we'd take the time to unlock its potential. Your old phone or laptop isn't just a piece of junk, it's part of a $91 billion treasure trove that's mostly going to waste. It seems like a no-brainer to recycle this valuable e-waste. So why is only about 22% of the e-waste mass properly collected and recycled? While recycling e-waste seems like an obvious solution, the reality is a bit more complex. There are numerous factors contributing to low recycling rates, and understanding them is crucial for improving our e-waste management. One major hurdle is increased consumption. As technology continues to evolve at a rapid pace, consumers are constantly upgrading to the latest devices. This creates a constant stream of e-waste, much of which ends up in landfills rather than recycling centers. Limited repair options also contribute to the problem. Many electronic devices are designed in a way that makes it difficult, if not impossible, to repair them. As a result, when these devices break or become obsolete, they are often discarded rather than fixed. Short product life cycles play a role as well. Today's electronics are often outdated within a few years, leading to a constant turnover of devices. This rapid cycle exacerbates the e-waste problem and hampers recycling efforts. Lastly, there's the issue of inadequate e-waste management infrastructure. In many parts of the world, there simply aren't enough facilities equipped to handle the volume of e-waste generated. This lack of infrastructure makes it incredibly difficult to manage and recycle e-waste effectively. Unfortunately, these challenges are not going away anytime soon. In fact, it's expected that recycling rates will decline to 20% by the end of the decade. This is a concerning trend, especially considering the environmental and health risks associated with e-waste. Despite its value, we're failing to recycle e-waste effectively, and it's a trend that's set to continue. As we move forward, it's clear that we need to address these challenges head-on if we hope to make a significant dent in the e-waste problem. E-waste isn't just a local issue, it's a global crisis with varying impacts around the world. Let's take a journey across continents to grasp the magnitude of this crisis. Starting in Europe, the continent with the highest per capita waste generation, nearly 39 pounds per person. Despite this, Europe leads the world in recycling, with rates topping 40%. It appears that they are taking the adage, "You've made your bed, now lie in it," quite seriously. Moving east, we land in Asia, the continent responsible for generating half of the world's e-waste. The issue here is not just the sheer volume but also the lack of comprehensive e-waste laws and collection targets. The result? A ticking time bomb of electronic debris. Our journey takes us south to Africa next. While the continent generates the least e-waste among the 5 major global regions, it also has the lowest recycling and collection rates, hovering at about 1%. This disparity paints a bleak picture of the e-waste landscape in Africa. But why this disparity? Why such a gap between generation and recycling rates? The reasons are manifold. Higher consumption, limited repair options, shorter product life cycles, the growing electronification of society, and inadequate e-waste management infrastructure all contribute to this gaping chasm. This global e-waste crisis is clearly unevenly distributed, with some regions bearing a heavier burden than others. The question is, how do we begin to address this? How do we ensure that the weight of this crisis is not borne by a few, but shared by all? The global e-waste crisis is unevenly distributed, with some regions bearing a heavier burden than others. Behind these staggering numbers, there's a human cost. Let's take a look at the real-life impact of e-waste. Our journey takes us to the Dandora dump site in Nairobi, where we meet people like Steve Okoth. Steve's livelihood hinges on rummaging through mountains of discards, sifting for e-waste that can be sold to businesses as recycled material. But this isn't a treasure hunt. The e-waste that Steve and others like him gather isn't harmless. It contains hazardous elements like mercury that pose serious health risks. When these electronic devices heat up, they release toxic gases. Steve tells us about the chest problems he faces, the days he can't work because the air is too thick with the smoke from smoldering e-waste. And yet, Steve and his fellow scavengers persist. It's a grim choice between health and hunger, between the immediate need to put food on the table and the looming threat of long-term illness. We are now used to the smoke, Steve says, because if you don't go to work, you will not eat. This is the human cost of our global e-waste crisis. It's not just about the 62 million tons of discarded devices, or the 22% recycling rate, or the 82 million tons we're projected to reach by 2030. It's about people like Steve, who risk their health every day due to our failure to manage e-waste effectively. The e-waste crisis isn't just about numbers and statistics. It's about people like Steve, who risk their health every day due to our failure to manage e-waste effectively.